Okay, so the recording started. I'm going to go ahead and run through that one more time as far as who is here from the committee members. Warren Remy is not. We got Jeff Sheets, Brian Benford, Roger Boreal, Clint Liu, Dr. Robert Puckett, Dr. Ketke Patel, Randy McCarty, Nancy Zions, Robert Shoppy is not on, and Dr. Nancy Kreider is on. From the Texas Department of Agriculture staff, there's myself, Mike Kelly, Aaron Carriel is on, David Castillo is on, Leslie Smith is on. Is there anybody else on with TDA? Skylar, are you on today?
No, Skylar was in another meeting.
Okay, very good.
Anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Who was that?
Hello.
Who is that? We can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
But who are you?
I have no idea. Let me look at my driver's license. Hang on.
That's Randy?
Must be Randy.
Okay, I
Must
got
be.
Randy. All right, great.
Sorry.
So again, TDA staff, there's myself, Aaron, David Castillo, Leslie Smith. Is there anybody else on the line with TDA? No? Okay. So members of the public, I've got Debbie Aguirre on the line. Dr. Bob Davis is on the line. And are there any other members of the public? See, I've got a 361-658-0234 number. Who's that? 361 number?
That's me, Mike, Debbie.
That's you, Debbie? Okay.
Yes, sir. I don't know why I'm showing up twice. I think it's because I can see y'all on my computer, but the mic wouldn't hook up, so I had to call in also.
That's what
that's
it is.
why.
That's exactly why. Okay, very good.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that 210 is Nancy Zions.
Probably.
And that looks like 512657. That looks like our TDA line. Aaron. Anonymous caller. I have an anonymous caller on the line. That could be Dr. Bob. And Brian.
I was the 657 number, Mike.
You're a 657 number. There's Clint.
Yeah, 657-5913. Yeah.
Leslie. Well, it shows you as anonymous, but I got you. All right, that looks like everybody then. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so of those public member or public members of the public who are here, are any of you wanting to provide public comment today? We'll do that a little later on, but I'm just I'm wanting to know so I can call on you, and I think we'll dispense with what your occupation is and all that till we actually call on you. But if any of you want to do that, let me know now so I know to call on you.
Yeah, Bob Davis here. Yeah, Roger, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll call on you when the time comes, and I'll ask you for the name, rank, and serial number then. And anybody else?
Debbie. Roger
Debbie?
Aguirre.
Okay. All right.
And on my part, I'll be representing the local chapter, the Coastal Bend Pest Control Association.
Okay. Great. Anybody else? Okay. Well, if you're listening and you think when we get to that point of the meeting, I'll make a last call, and we'll let anybody else who's changed their mind and decided they want to say something. So, moving on. Review and approval of our minutes of our April 23rd, 2020 meeting, and there was a nice little thing that the department sent out that had all of our stuff like with links, which I thought was a really nice way of doing that. And so I did actually look at the minutes. I hope everybody else did. And so I'm looking for a motion to approve in a second.
This is Nancy Kreider. I move to approve the minutes.
This Randy, I second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, minutes approved. Moving on to what I think we've been looking forward to for some time, or at least I know I have, is the summary of the pesticide drift project and CDC NIOSH sensor update from Dr. Patel. So you are on, Dr. Patel.
Hey everyone, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, first of all, how is everybody? I'm sorry I skipped last meeting. Unfortunately, I was deployed in the field, so it's good to be back and working from home.
We
a
figured
quick,
we're good.
Yeah.
Anybody with COVID? Anyone positive here?
Nope.
Uh,
I'm positive I'm not positive.
Good.
That's good to know. So I'll try to be brief as much possible, and I'll start with the updates from the CDC NIOSH meeting and a couple of Texas Department of State Health Services or DSHS updates, and then I will move on to the next item, which is the California's pesticide drift study. So starting with, can anybody hear me? Because I'm hearing a lot
Yeah,
of.
we can hear you. There's somebody that's got some reverb. If you'll mute your lines, please.
Probably if everybody would mute.
Yeah, I was going to say, and Deb, if you're on the phone and computer, mute the computer.
All right. All right.
I
think
can't
this
get it
worked
through my
properly.
computer, so I was having the audio through my phone.
Okay. I think, but it still worked. I mean, whatever anybody did, I think it worked. So thank you for that. So quick updates from CDC NIOSH Sensor Pesticide meeting. Every year we have an annual meeting in person, but due to this year we were planning to host it in our home state of Texas and in the city of Austin, but obviously that got tabled and pushed back and eventually canceled because of COVID-19. But in lieu of that, what CDC decided is they want to do a series of virtual meetings. So we've had two so far virtual meetings, one in the month of May and one in the month of June. Our next one is scheduled in the month of August. So that's kind of like the replacement for an in-person conference. Some of the key items that have been discussed in these meetings is in relation to COVID-19. Specifically around pesticide use and exposures among worker populations, and apparently most states have seen a dip in human or work-related exposures to pesticides, but those are agricultural pesticides, and also a lot of exposures involving H-2A workers, workers on H-2A visa in ag sector. That's a decline that several states have observed. And what we've seen a spike in is a lot of disinfectant and cleaning agent use, which are also classified as pesticides by EPA. So that is a spike that practically every state in the country has seen. So in relation to that, here at DSHS in Texas, we keep monitoring our poison control calls about both occupational and non-occupational exposures to disinfectant and cleaning agents in relation to COVID-19. So back in April, we released a health advisory for the public as we saw about a 70% spike in calls for exposures to hand sanitizers and disinfectant chemicals. And of these 70% spike calls to poison centers, majority of them were in children, which is not surprising given, most of the time they spend at home and they have access to all of these disinfectant chemicals at home, including bleach. And just very recently, a couple of weeks ago, we also encountered that some pest control companies were also getting involved in either helping with disinfection processes or selling disinfectant products to consumers. And incidentally, we encountered an instance where they were purchasing from the manufacturer in the manufacturer's container, but then selling it to the consumers in water bottles or, any available containers that were not containing product labels or any information. And because of that, we did encounter a few people getting exposed to it. Two of the ones required hospitalization and ED visit, one of which was a 6-year-old child, and another was a person at a workplace. So we released a second health advisory, and I believe I did send links to both of these health advisory, which contains all the details, to Mike Kelly. So Mike, if you can share it with the rest of the group, that'll be great. And if y'all have any questions on those health advisories, feel free to reach out to me. So those are my quick updates for the CDC meeting and from DSHS's side. Now moving on to the next part of my agenda was just providing a quick summary on a study that the state of California did on drift exposures around public schools. And this particular thing was of high interest to this group. And so I was able to reach out to our colleagues in California and request additional details. So I did share that link with Mike. So if everybody wants to take a deeper dive into that report, Mike, feel free to circulate it with the rest of the group. But today I'll just give a quick snapshot of what they did. And also a note that, this is almost like a decade behind observations. So they did this study they looked at the data for 2010. So obviously it's not quite relevant or representative, but the reason that it's of an interest is, number one, the approach and the methods that they have used is something similar we could do here in Texas as well. What they did is the California Department of Pesticide Regulations, which I'm going to refer as CDPR, collaborated with the California Department of Health, CDPHE, and they have something called as a pesticide use reporting program, or PUR, that collects and disseminates data on pesticide use and human exposures. So CDPR looked at PUR data to estimate pesticide applications within a quarter mile of school property boundaries. They assessed approximately about 2,500 public schools spread across top 15 counties in California that are high in agricultural operations. And what they did is they linked the school location data with the pesticide use data to map the drift exposures occurring in those 15 counties in California. Some of the key observations from this project were most of the schools did not have pesticides that were applied, in nearby. And the pesticide groups that they looked at were like 6 key categories. The pesticides that are classified as carcinogens, which is cancer causing, pesticides that are classified as having reproductive and development toxicity. They also looked at pesticides that are classified as cholinesterase inhibitors, meaning those that block cholinesterase transmission. They also looked at pesticides that are known to cause air contamination. They looked at fumigants. And California has a set of pesticides that they closely monitor as high risk for public exposures. So those were the 6 categories that they looked at when they were mapping it for pesticide use around schools. A small percentage of schools did have pesticide applications in their vicinity areas, and those schools were technically, distributed across multiple counties. So it wasn't like, one county was specifically high versus the other. They did see a lot of variation by county, and depending on seasonality. That was another observation they made. One of the key statistic was an estimated about more than 500,000 pounds of pesticides of public health concern were applied or within quarter mile of public schools in 15 counties. And the top 3 pesticides that were applied around school vicinity were chlorpicrin, 1,3-dichloropropene, and methyl bromide. These were the top 3 pesticides that they found to be, that were being applied around the schools in those 15 counties that they focused on. And obviously, there were some limitations to this project. They did not assess the impact of school pesticide use restrictions. And the impact of that on use of these pesticides and drift exposures. And second of all, they also did not attempt to measure any children's exposure to pesticides during this project because that was the data that they did not have available. So that's a quick snapshot of the findings from that project in California. And as a result of this project, what they were able to do is they were able to guide some of the policy level decisions in school districts and in ag businesses surrounding school districts on application of these pesticides. So which is why it is something that, is of a large interest to many other states and something that we can do here as well in near future. So with that, I'll pause. And if there's any questions, we can open for that.
You're muted, Roger.
You need to unmute.
Am I unmuted now?
You're good.
Yes.
All right. I keep hitting the button and it doesn't click right away. So it sounds like this was like almost 100% ag exposure from what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Correct.
That's what I was going to ask too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how far was the drift and it was all basically agricultural around the schools, part of the schools, the crop fields. It looks.
Yes. Yep. So those were the 15 counties that they looked at. Those were heavy in agriculture, and they had school districts, in those rural locations. And another interesting finding, what they found was majority of the children that attended these schools were Hispanic children in the high pesticide use school district areas.
So and probably then their housing was equally impacted, would be my guess.
Yeah.
The pesticides you listed, were they, I heard methyl bromide and I heard chloropicrin, are they basically all fumigants?
Not basically all fumigants. I think they looked at those 6 categories that I mentioned, and I can actually try to pull up. But they did look at like several other, there were more than like 50 or 60 different pesticides that they looked at, but then they categorized it by groups, meaning the effects of those pesticides, like whether they were cancer causing or whether they were, reproductive or development toxicity, or if they were fumigants or other ones that, California regulation mandates close monitoring of those exposures. So that's how they were looking at, or basically that's how they selected the pesticides that they wanted to look at. And there were about 10 of those that they found that were being applied in these, quarter-mile radius of schools in 15 counties in California. But the top 3 were the ones that I mentioned.
Dr. Patel, with that, so we're on structural, but with that, were they picked, you think, or were they selected based on what the exposures of the farm workers, their agricultural workers, were being exposed to in those reports?
No, I don't think so. That was at all a criteria for selection.
Okay. I was just thinking about which exposures they were having report, if they were the big major things that people were being exposed to occupationally, were they also the ones being drift near the schools? That's where my mind was going on that one.
Yeah, and that could be, but I don't think so. They were in any ways making the connection between human exposures at that point in time. They didn't look at exactly if people were getting exposed, whether occupational or non-occupational for these ones. But, clearly stating that it is quite a possibility because obviously it's happening on these farms or other areas nearby. So.
Thanks.
Yeah. Getting back to the disinfectant sanitizers issue that you were talking about earlier, and you may have said, and I just didn't quite catch it, but Do we have Texas-specific data on that? I mean, is that
Yep.
something that, okay.
Yep, we generate it on a daily basis, and we're very closely monitoring every single product, not just disinfectants, cleanings, any other green chemicals that people are using for COVID-19, sanitizers, or whatever things that they are using to prevent COVID-19. We're monitoring each of them closely on a daily basis.
And as you said, most of the poisonings or the adverse exposures have been with children, I guess. So.
Yes, to date, but I think now we are trying to see more adult and work-related exposures as people have started going back to work. But we've seen that happen a lot in children too, as they're staying at home, and obviously a lot of hand sanitizer exposures.
Yeah.
There was another issue with methanol in hand sanitizers that did raise a lot of concerns, particularly in pediatric populations, which was coming in from Mexico. So that was something else also that we are closely monitoring right now.
That's part of that recall of the hand sanitizers, right?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wood alcohol and methanol.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Interesting. Well, you're reporting on a lot of things that our committee doesn't really have a lot of control or authority over, unfortunately, but it's still interesting to know it. So, yeah.
Sure.
Any other questions from anybody?
I think the only one that relates to this committee, Roger, was that incident where we are observing a lot of pest control businesses evolving into disinfection services as well. And so that's where I see, that connection happening with this committee, where, certain things are not.
Randy, can you comment on that, or do you have thought? Because I know here in Houston, we're seeing some of that.
Yeah, so we're seeing it here a lot as well. And, the unfortunate thing, and I brought this up last time, it's such an unregulated industry right now. There's some big issues that we really ought to discuss at another time with the pest control industry doing disinfectants and doing, the virus services.
That spraying, that.
We're seeing and hearing all kinds of nightmares.
Yeah. Well,
are there any particular products that we should be asking for some notification on or warnings about that are being used?
So one of them, which I brought up before, is that you have companies that are offering. In fact, one of them's offering 90-day control for the virus. I don't know how that can happen, and maybe Ms. Patel could speak to that, but I don't know of any material that's out there that's going to give you 90 days control for this virus.
Anything.
Yep, that is absolutely correct. And, those are some of the issues that we are encountering as well. In addition to, like people misusing certain products or, because they're not trained to do something in disinfection, the way that they are, approaching consumers with or selling certain things to consumers, and consumers are also not aware of how to use them. There's a lot of misuse and human exposures that is happening, and we are encountering a lot of those. Also require ED or ED visits. While our hospitals are flooded with COVID patients, we don't want to add these things to that mix, and so that's another concern that I feel like in some ways this word has to get out. And when we released the health advisory about this yesterday, I did reach out to Todd Kirkwood and asked him to send this out to all the TPCA members. So at least whichever businesses are registered with TPCA, at least they will be getting a notification about this.
I sent that to you guys, what Keki had sent to me about the disinfectants a little while ago. I do want to note, too, that Janet Hurley had sent that out yesterday to all her listservs, so it's getting out there. But, yes, please forward that on to everyone as much as possible.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, Mike. Just probably this is not something absolute interest to the group, but just an FYI, DSHS is currently exploring a potential for collaboration with Janet Hurley's group, particularly because we want to focus on child care centers and disinfectant or cleaning, other pest, cleaning agent use in child care centers and exposures. So that's something that we're working with them. We have a call, I guess, next week to talk about it.
All right, that sounds very good, and that sounds like, particularly with what Randy's talking about, this is something we want to be watching, and it may be that it'll be something that'll need to be addressed by the legislature. Clearly, the authority we have over this right now is pretty limited, unless it's an actual pest control company that's already licensed doing it. But
I was going to say it's kind of like
yeah.
false advertising or somewhere in there. I don't know how much reach we have in that.
I would say that 90-day thing is a classic deceptive trade practices case, which I happen to know a little bit about. I happen to spent only about 7 years in that division at the AG, but that's what it sounds like to me. But anyway. And
some of those I mean, on the side of thinking that everybody's doing pretty quick because they didn't even recognize that they were doing it. They thought they were following the label and selling, but not doing it properly. Anyway.
Yeah, that 90-day thing, though, is clearly deceptive. I mean, that's intentional. So
exactly.
Anybody have anything else on this? If not, we'll move on. Going once, going twice. Okay. So next item is insurance claims related to structural pest control. We're putting our board members to work this meeting. So Nancy Zients, you are on to talk about the insurance issues.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Mute, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Because I hear a lot of noise back there. Anyway,
if you're not speaking, will you all please mute your lines? Thank you very much. I do want to let you guys know too that in your packets of information and/or the links that I sent out, I put in there the insurance requirement rule that gives you the insurance requirement. And then yesterday I sent out the document that Nancy provided that she's going to go over some today. So you have that information.
Okay. Somebody is. Hello? Okay.
Mike, it's Warren. If you can mute Warren, that'll help.
Okay, where's Warren at? Let me see if I can mute people here. I'm unable to mute them myself. Well, that's a very interesting conversation.
Brain, please mute.
Warren, if you could mute your phone, please.
Oh, this is lovely.
Yes, Roger. Can you hear me?
No, we were needing you to mute. There's a lot of noise coming in from your line.
Perfect.
Okay.
There you go.
Is that, well, so far so good. Okay. What I did, I just went through some of my clients from the past, and all I pulled up was the WDIR claims. One list is just of the home inspection companies that I had insured over the years, and I went through about 20 years of data through to see what all I insured and what the claims were. On the home inspection claims, the WDIRs, I probably over the last 20 years only had written about 25 or 30 companies, that just the home inspection companies. And I redacted all the insured's names and even messed with some of the policy dates so that, it can't go back and I'm trying to keep their privacy. And the other list is from pest control companies, which I insured over the last 20, 25 years. At one time or another, I probably insured about maybe 1,500. So you can see I never insured that many at one time, but over the years, you write some, you lose some, but you can see the correlation between how many claims there were from pest control companies that do WDIRs versus the claims from the home inspectors that the WDIR claims. And this is one reason why we have insurance carriers out there that won't do WDIRs unless the pest control company does less than 25%. And one of the reasons is because if these pest control companies let me start that sentence again. The home inspection companies, the rates are based on sales. And normally the total annual sales for a home inspector doing WDIRs, the premiums are going to be very low. We're talking anywhere between $1,100 and $1,500 a year. So when you go back and look at the loss ratios on some of these, and if you notice, there's some that are a little bit more than what the minimum required by the state, which is $200,000 with a $300 aggregate. I've got some there where, they were a little bit pricey. I never did write the minimum required by the state because I'm an insurance person. I think it's too low. And when you're looking at minimum premiums, it doesn't matter whether you're writing $200,000 or $1 million. The premium's going to be the same. There's a minimum premium to issue the paper and all of that. Now back to the pest control companies doing the WDIRs. Though this is why insurance carriers want you doing other work, termite jobs, pest control, besides just WDIRs, because there's more premium, I know profitability, hey. But anyway, let me see. You can see the correlation between why the WDIRs, and of course right now I think I write maybe 2 or 3 home inspection companies right now. And last year I broke under the pressure and wrote another one, and before the year was out we already have a claim, but I don't have the numbers on that one yet. So right now, does anybody have any questions?
So Nancy, this is Mike. So what you're saying, I just want to get it in a nutshell, basically, is that you see more claims with companies that are just home inspectors doing like the mechanical inspection of the home and wood destroying insect reports in addition to that than you do structural pest control businesses that do other types of pest control services.
I've over the last 25 years, the maximum amount combined of the home inspectors that I wrote, maybe 25 companies, and here are all the claims that we had just out of, let's say, 25 companies over the last 20 years. Now then you look at the pest control companies that do general pest, they do termite work, they do pre-treats, they spray yards and all of that. Out of, I would say, roughly estimate over the last 20 years, I'm looking at 1,500 different companies that I insured on and off over the years. And the correlation between your chance of a home inspector where you have an $1,100 premium, and I was high from what they were telling me. I'm too high because whenever I wrote a home inspector that does just WDI reports, this is why. Of course, all of these were non-renewed for losses. Anyway, did that make any sense?
Yes, because I was going to ask, you had the numerator, so there's 11 out of 25 on the home inspectors, and there's, let me count them up on the other one. The other one is a denominator of 1,500. I think that's important, Mike, to add into these, because otherwise they can be a bit deceiving about the volumes that we're getting. Thank you for bringing up that point.
And then also on the pest control companies, you're looking at larger premiums. And, insurance companies are in business.
Nancy, my point is 12 out of 20, 12 out of 1,500 of the pest control companies had it, whereas 11 out of the 25 or so that you insured of the inspectors have it. That's a big difference, percentage-wise.
That's a big difference.
your claims are out regardless of what the premium
Right,
is.
right. Okay. Well, I'm an insurance person. I look at premiums versus losses all the time, you know. But yeah, that's why so many insurance carriers out there will not do even a pest control company that does other work besides WDIRs. If their total sales is more for WDIRs is more than 25% of their total sales, they won't insure them. And this is why. You know, I didn't go through. Got it?
Yeah, no, that's helpful.
Yeah.
And that's why, any recommendations for us other than you don't do the minimum, you never insure them at the minimum?
I don't do the minimum. And I used to just write, I would do 300,000, 300,000. And today, over the last probably 15 years, all I write is $1 million with a $2 million aggregate. I won't do anything lower. Mainly to protect myself from an E&O standpoint, because I had one here from about 20 years ago that I had written 300,000 per occurrence with a 300,000 aggregate, and he was the one here with that 300,000 claim after we paid policy limits on that one. And then he turned around calling me about 2-3 weeks later, almost crying, because he's getting sued individually because the claim was for 450,000.
There you go.
400. Yeah. Yeah. So that was the last one I ever wrote with 300. After that date, I just went, no way. 1 million, take it or leave it.
Hey, Mike, can I ask a question real quick? How long has the requirement been the 200,000, 300,000 with the state?
It's been
at least 20.
Yeah, it's been that ever since I've been around the industry for my 28 years.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe it's time to consider a change.
Yeah, it was raised to that number back when I was still at the board. That's when we last increased it, and I left in '99, so it's been a while.
That is why we have it in the discussion for possible action to consider whether or not the committee would want to increase those amounts. Who was it that asked the question? I'm sorry. About the
limits?
It was Randy.
That was Randy.
Randy.
Yeah, Randy.
Sorry about that. It's anonymous.
No worries.
It was anonymous. And may I make another point? I know in the past I've made comments about, and of course I think it's on the C category, the next it's on the agenda for have WDIR inspection only category, but my opinion would be an extension of the termite category, not a separate category by itself. I think you need to go through the termite training and then additional training to do WDIRs. That's Nancy's comment.
I agree with you, Nancy. I think if you're going to do wood destroying insect reports, you got to go through the whole 9 yards like we have. Just like if I was going to be a home inspector, I would have to do the whole thing through their training program to be legit.
Right.
So I totally agree.
I'm with that because if you look at it, I've now calculated back on my numerator. You got 44. Granted, it's one insurer, but over a long time, 44% of the home inspectors had a claim, and only 0.8% of the pest control professionals had a claim. That's pretty.
And you're right. This is only one insurance carrier. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And the gentleman a few months ago made the comment that about the 25% of your sales is WDIRs. They don't want to write you. Well, this is why. Mm-hmm. But there are carriers out there that will.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So
I really like the idea of some training for the inspectors only, but the training, shouldn't focus on treatments. It should focus on inspection and damage and signs and that type of thing. So if we have them go through all the treatment type of training, it may not be the proper focus so they can be the best they can be at what they do.
I would have to wholeheartedly agree with that, Dr. Bob. This is Randy.
Yep.
It does concern me, because if you've had your house inspected recently for the purchase of a new home, it takes quite a bit of time to do that, and they're going to add the WDI. I'm just not sure they're going to devote the time needed to do a thorough inspection on it. This whole topic really worries me about letting the home inspections do WDIs.
I agree.
So I guess what Dr. Bob was saying and Randy concurred with, and I want to make sure that I understand this in my mind. You're agreeing that it should not be a standalone inspection category, but an expansion of the termite category. And for those who are doing more wood destroying insect reports than treatment, if you will, we need more training focused on the inspection. Is that what I'm hearing?
If we're looking at adding a category, then yes. Or if for the home inspectors to add more on the termite, they've got to have that inspection knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay.
My suggestion would be.
You're still considering, Randy, you're still considering then that was an additional category, as opposed to what Nancy Zions was saying, is that it should still be the termite category, but there needs to be some additional training for people who do predominantly wood destroying insect reports.
I'm trying to think here real quick, Mike. If you added more inspection knowledge on the exam, I mean, that's not a bad thing for people in the pest control industry either. I mean, that's really a good thing, to be honest. To Dr. Bob's point, there's a lot of emphasis on the treatment part of it, and the material safety, things of that nature. So if we're going to leave the category alone, it's a culture change for all of the pest control industry to add the more inspection. But is that a bad thing? Not at all. I think that'd be a good plus for our industry.
And I tend to agree with you. I mean, there's no reason we couldn't take the existing category and start shifting more training in the inspection portion. I mean, the first thing you've got to go out to do is go inspect a home and identify pests, identify wood destroying insects to begin with. So even if you're going to treat them, or that's all you do is the wood destroying insect report. So I could see where that would be very beneficial, just to take in the existing category and put more of a focus on the inspection portion than we have right now, because it's predominantly treatment.
Yeah,
I think that's right, Mike. But I agree with everything that you've said. But I think from the home inspector standpoint, they would say, well, yeah, but why should I sit through hours of discussion about termiticides, pesticide chemistry, as Randy said, material safety and application techniques for termiticides? I mean, like, those guys would argue that they don't need that, So if we just expand the current termite category, that really doesn't satisfy the needs of those other groups, right? So the home inspectors.
If I could interject here, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves on the agenda, and
True.
I had not.
Sorry.
That's all right. I wanted to talk about all this anyway, and we'll just consider this last little round of comments to have been discussion under that topic, because I think it was all good discussion. I don't want to have to repeat it. But,
So Roger, what about back
if I could back to the insurance for a minute, because I wasn't quite finished with that.
Thank you.
So this is a question, I guess, for Nancy and or Mike. How do we go about figuring out what the right minimums are if we're going to recommend new minimums? Is there a way that we can survey coverage out there? Either one of you can answer that, and figure out what the right new minimum ought to be.
Well, that's a good question. And you know what? I need to look at the law on that to see if the law specifies amounts.
I think the law just specifies a minimum amount. I don't think it specifies a maximum.
Yeah, I mean,
as I recall it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't,
It's
it would
just
be
a
like,
minimum.
it would be like auto insurance though. So you're talking about minimum amounts and aggregate amounts, I think, particularly for insurers like Nancy. And I mean, what are the across, because I don't know which companies you use to insure, but I mean, is that the 300 per occurrence, 1 million aggregate, or what are you seeing out there is that kind of the other insurers I know people will sell to the lowest. That's okay. I understand that. But what's being offered? I mean, I would guess it's probably anything from like 100,000 as a minimum, but we've got 200,000 now, right? Is that
Right.
reading that?
Right, with a 300,000 aggregate.
It's the aggregate to me that seems really too low somehow, but if I go back and look at Nancy's stuff, let me look at that sheet again.
Well, the aggregate is it's the per occurrence that's too low, because it's per occurrence is how much the maximum that will be paid out for a claim.
Correct.
The aggregate is the maximum to be paid out in a policy year.
Correct. So they're both too low, is what you're saying.
My opinion, but I'm an insurance agent. Yes, it's too low.
Well,
but
I think, again, we need data from, like, what are people carrying, what kind of claims are being paid, how many folks are hitting their maximum on one claim or their maximum on the aggregate. I mean, we can figure out some way to get data like that.
Right, because some of these, if you look at the maximum, there's, not that this says anything, but there's, of the ones you've got here, you've only got 1, 2, 3, 4 that over 100,000, which it seems like, so that's why I was saying that maybe the occurrence, but you've got some biggies that maybe that one needs to go to 250 or 300, and then you got the aggregate both. But I hear what you're saying about the single one, because what kind of, Nancy, these are all it looks like wood destroying inspect.
Yeah, these are just
claims.
The WDIRs. That's it. This is not other claims.
Yeah, I was going to say, what kind of other claims are you getting? Because the insurance covers not just wood destroying insects, right? The insurance limits that we are talking about and that I looked at are any claims against.
The other big ones that we get are pre-treats, especially in the school districts. If something goes wrong with the building, even though the pest control operator did the pre-treat 10 years ago, and something goes wrong with the air conditioning, everybody gets sued. I have clients now that are ongoing with pre-treat claims that happened that they did the pre-treat, 8 or 9, 10 years ago, and now something is wrong with the building, and anybody that touched that building is now being sued, and these are high-dollar claims. But on the other hand, the limits that these pest control companies carry that do these pre-treats, they're going to have higher limits because the general contractors require higher limits, and along with an umbrella too. So those guys they're going to carry $1 million, and in some cases up to $5 million per occurrence.
Sure, got it.
Yeah. And we see a lot of those. I've got one client ongoing that's got 2 claims right now with when they, because they're always building schools and adding on to schools. It seems like the school districts are the ones that I have ongoing right now. I'm sure there's others out there.
Yeah. And you're talking about businesses that have, because they do pre-treats, have very specific exposure that's much higher than a lot of other people. So.
Oh yeah, and we have to certify to the general contractor, and they have to go along with all the requirements for the insurance with what the general contractor and architects require, and all of them are going to require million per occurrence, and then in most cases an umbrella on top of that.
Well, that almost sounds like the marketplace has sort of solved the problem in that instance.
Yes,
because
in that instant,
the contractor takes care of it by requiring it.
Right.
So,
The ones that are going to have the lower limits are your the guys that are just the one-man operators that just do general pest and stuff like that. They want to get something cheap, but
yeah, but we're talking about limits that were set 20 years ago.
I know,
Right.
I know, right.
And again, back to my point, Section 1951.312, liability insurance, which is the law, has those minimums set at 200,000 and 300,000. So those are set in law as minimums.
But I'm not sure that we don't have the authority to set higher minimums, do we not?
It doesn't.
I'd have to go back and look at that language.
It does not look like it to me, Roger. But yeah, it'd be good.
Okay. Well, I'll need to take a look at it, and obviously your council will need to take a look at it. But I'm not sure that
Versus legislation on this end, right?
Right. It may take legislation, but we can always make recommendations for legislation.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it reads exactly the way the law reads. The department may not issue or renew a structural pest control business license until the licensed applicant files with the department a policy or contract of insurance approved as sufficient by the department in an amount not less than 200,000 for bodily injury and property damage, with a minimum total aggregate of 300,000 for all occurrences.
Yeah, and then, but not less than could be a higher number, I guess would be my argument anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where I was thinking we might have some rulemaking authority there, but I'll just have to take a look at it. And obviously we want input from the official legal counsel that you're using, not my unofficial legal counsel.
Absolutely. And David, our general counsel is on the council. David Castillo. We'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at that.
Yeah, because if we could do it by rulemaking, it'd be much easier, obviously. So.
And just so everybody knows, I'm listening, but I'm gonna have to do some looking into that. I can't give you an answer right now.
I wouldn't expect you to. So, any more on the insurance? I think we want to look at our authority, and I also think we've got to try to figure out some way of figuring out if we do have the authority, or even if we don't, and want to make a recommendation to the ledge, how we figure this out in terms of what a new minimum ought to be. And it seems to me that's going to require data of some kind. I don't know who's best positioned to gather that, but Mike, can you and Nancy sort of confer and figure out if there's a way to do that offline?
Yeah, absolutely. We could take a look at that. I mean, I would think that Nancy might have a better grip on that because I don't really, I don't really know what's going on with the policy writing and the amounts and things of that nature. So, but yeah, we can talk about that.
And internal counsel as well can look up, maybe compare if there's other states, what they're doing.
That is something we can definitely do from the agency standpoint.
We know, because think about, we know what we're doing. We've got California, who there'll be extremes, from one state to another, but that gives us kind of a benchmark for what's happening today versus 20 years ago. So I have down the insurance minimum was 20 years ago. Need to review and get some benchmarks and make recommendations. So we want to bring this back to the next meeting, Roger?
That was my thought.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's jump ahead. I'm going to use my prerogative since we already started talking about it, and since we're basically talking about it, to the 4C, the separate category for WDIR, since we already kind of entered into that conversation. And I think, Mike, you're on for this, and I can't recall what it was you were going to be telling us today. I don't see that we have any documents specifically to look at, so maybe just jump in here.
It's really, I guess, we've had some discussion on this in two prior meetings. This was brought to us initially by a business that is a home inspection business pursuing this, and and we've heard some public comment in regards to it from industry as well. There seems to be a fairly decent split as to those in favor and those who are against a separate category. So with the last meeting that we had, the committee was interested in addressing this. So I wanted to put it back on the agenda for the committee to address and to have more conversation about it, and we can kind of go from there.
Well, I'm curious as to the thought of, because we do obviously have a split. I'm curious, though, as to the thought of perhaps making if we were to create a separate category, and of course, I'm not assuming that we're in agreement that we're going to do that, but if we were to do it, making it, I guess, a much more difficult thing to do in the sense of having a lot more stringent testing requirements, possibly based on what Nancy just said, having even higher insurance minimums for those people. I mean, if we have the authority to do that by rule, we could certainly, based on the evidence that we have, make their insurance requirements more strict. But how does that conceptually, do people have an issue with that, or does anybody want to fire back at me on that? Because I'm still thinking kind of like, what we just heard in the last comment. It's hard for me to justify making people get trained in something that they're never going to do. A bunch of termiticide application and MSDS and so on and so forth. I don't understand the thinking that they have to know all that if they're never ever going to do it. So, but I'm opening up the floor to fire back at this idea, because I'm obviously have kind of been leaning in favor of it. I don't think that's a secret. So I'd sort of like to hear the contra argument if I could.
So Roger, this Randy. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming they would go through the same process if we decide to do this: apprentice, technician, and CA, correct?
Right.
All right. So you're looking at a year before they can actually do these, because the CA has to sign off on the WDI. Am I correct?
That is not correct, Randy. That's actually not been a requirement since around the time that we transitioned in 2008 over to the Department of Agriculture. That's why the new T5 form doesn't have that certified applicator signature on there. Basically, what took place was back when that was removed from the rule that you had to do that, it was kind of proliferating non-compliance in that you would have certified applicators pre-signing these things. They're going out the door. Technicians are doing the inspections, and the CA had no idea what happened at the inspection. So there, and even afterwards, if a technician brings a certified applicator something to sign, how does a certified applicator know what he saw and what took place? So it was really something that was deemed as unnecessary, and that hasn't been a requirement for many years.
So I just baited you, and you took it hook, line, and sinker on that. So basically, you're saying that somebody can become and do a WDI after about 2 months after getting this license. I am not for them getting a license if that's the case. That you need a lot more experience to be able to find and to do the proper inspection, to know all the different types of wood-destroying insects.
But however, the company would have to have a CA of record in the category. They'd have to have a business license. So the individual has to be working under those categories, correct?
That's my understanding.
And there has to be insurance and so on. I mean, there's still some, some things that are required there. But yeah, and it's actually not after a couple months. I mean, in all actuality, you can fully train an apprentice within a couple of weeks, and then apply for technician exam, and depending on how quickly we can get that turned around, and you can get scheduled with PSI, then it could happen within a month's time that somebody becomes a technician if they're getting after it.
Yeah, Mike, that's my concern, is that if a home inspector can do this with a minimal amount of time in the field, they just don't have the knowledge and the experience to be able to find and be able to recognize the different types of wood-destroying insects. And I feel like that the insurance numbers are going to explode against the homeowners. I mean the home inspectors, according to the statistics that Nancy showed us earlier. If we open this up to them.
Yeah. So if I can, as I think about this, I realize that we're all thinking in terms of sort of the traditional apprenticeship program working towards becoming a technician or eventually a certified applicator in pest management, right? But what the home inspectors are asking to do is to be able to train to the degree that we determine that is good enough for them to be able to inspect for wood destroying insects. And I think these are they're just two separate issues. And it feels like, as we think about this, and I've done this too. I mean, we think about the way we do pest management, right? And the way that we train people to do pest management. I think we just sort of have to take a sort of a wholesale restructuring approach to this if we're going to build a separate category for wood destroying insect inspectors, right? It seems to me. Right? And maybe it is a long-term training process, Randy, where, a person that works under whatever we want to call the person that's analogous to a certified applicator within the home inspection companies, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever we think we want to assign in terms of nomenclature to that person or the people that work under them. You're right. There needs to be some very rigorous training. I mean, you can't just turn somebody loose that's never had any experience looking for wood destroying insects in the same way that you can't do it for pest management. So it feels like we're kind of locked into this mindset that, we're going to do this in the same way that we do as people progress through pest management and their credentials. And in some ways we should, but I think you're right. It requires a significant amount of training. So anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
Well,
if that makes sense.
I would be absolutely in favor of increasing the training requirements for everybody that's doing WDI reports, whether they're doing it as part of a pest control company or a home inspection company. I think, to Randy's point, people need to know what they're doing, and it may be that we need everybody who does it to have 6 months experience before they're allowed to do it on their own or something. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know that that's the right amount of time, but I mean, some amount of time that's more than what we've got required now, because that kind of gets back to the original comment, and it relates back to Nancy's statistics that, there's some issues here. And I certainly know from my years of experience that there's some issues here, and there always have been, as far as how well these things are done and how much attention to detail is given to an inspection. And, it may be that we need to sort of raise the floor for everybody that does them, not just one group or the other group, but just a thought. Yeah.
Well, Roger, I think that's a great suggestion on that. It's mm-hmm. I'm not against the homeowners or the home inspection industry at all. It's just my worry is that the lack of knowledge on them doing these. And so you're completely right, though. There are some pest control companies out there that are doing WDIs that might need to be, have a little bit more education on the WDIs. It is a very tricky inspection. Mm-hmm. And if there's any legalities, if there's any lawsuits that are going to happen, boy, that's one that can sure happen easy.
Well, having had, this is Nancy Kreider again here, from the public's point of view, I have to tell you, whether it's a home inspector or a pestico termite inspector, as I call, I've had 2 daughters purchase houses in the last year, and there is so much wiggle room. It's like, if they were seeing the places, this doesn't guarantee anyway. It's like a, CIA notes on everybody that's out there, whether you're, no matter what you've had, it says, I may have missed something, sorry, you can't hold me accountable. So getting knowledge is power on this one. So I mean, again, I can see it both ways. I do also see about the number of, I don't know what this is the one I almost need more information on housing inspections. I don't know how many houses really show in pre-treats, how many show that they need pest control for wood destroying insects at all. It's kind of it's a nebulous thing of it's how many, how much. There's certainly some risk in both of them. But I'm supportive, like the rest of you, as far as getting content about inspections, because if you have no idea what you're looking at, you really have no idea how to treat it anyway.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't mind making this thing so hard to get that the people who requested this will regret asking for it.
Oh, that's your real interest, Roger.
Well, I mean, come on.
I agree.
I mean, and that's the whole key. That's the whole key to inspections.
Yeah.
We've been doing them for 40, 50 years. We did them when you didn't even have a report. I mean, you just did a visual, you found termites, you gave them an estimate. So, I mean, the more experience, and I've had a lot of good teachers through the years, and you learn what to write down, how to protect yourself, what you're looking for. And we've never had a problem. We've never had a lawsuit on a WDI ever.
Bob, is that Bob Davis? Is that who's talking?
We've been doing it forever.
No, that's Brian. That's Brian Binford.
That's Brian.
But you know, but there is a difference though between a WDIR inspection and a pest control company that does an inspection and then they find activity and then they sell a service.
Right.
A WDIR is going to be theoretically a lot more comprehensive, and it should be. And it should be top to bottom and all around, per Randy's comments about the training and such. But a lot of pest control companies, Brian, when they go out and do an inspection, as soon as they find activity, they kind of stop the inspection because now they can make the sale.
Yeah.
And we see that.
And
I'm not saying that's morally correct, but it's legally, it's not WDIR, right? That's different.
Right.
Yeah, you are correct, Dr. Bob.
That's correct.
And I think Brian and I have seen that in the industry often.
So, does anyone remember when the guy presented a couple meetings ago, what percentage of home inspectors are really looking or want to do this type of work? I mean, I know that's a vague, maybe it's vague, but do we know how many of them are doing it from what he said?
I can tell you that we get calls on it all the time. It's, it's a service that they want to add. They're already at the home. They're doing the inspection, mechanical inspection. And, then if they're not licensed to do a wood destroying insect report, then they have to turn that work to somebody else. So it's an add-on that they would very much like to have. And we get a lot of interest in it.
Well, you probably have some idea from the names of the companies that y'all license that, so and such and such home inspection currently has a termite category, right, Mike? So you've got some that are already doing it.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot. Yeah. As a matter of fact, it's kind of a niche, if you will, in the industry. In fact, I don't know how much I could go into it, but there's been companies that basically are I don't want to say they're a licensed farm. It's really not the way to put it, but there's companies that are built around training and these types of individuals to get licensed so that they can do this type of work. There are companies
that says that they've already recognized it's at value added, and they're willing to pay for the full termite license. So back to where we started some of the discussion is if everybody could use a good inspection that, if they're already willing to pay for it, it says it's a value to them and they're willing to pay for it, and not everyone will. And I'd rather have somebody who's willing to pay for it, put the time in and know about it in my house, running or checking my new house or whatever, than somebody who got it in as a quick and easy, couple months of training.
Right. That's right, Nancy. I think you're right. You've identified that there are a group of people that are willing to pay for training, but when they get the training, I think what their argument now is that they're spending a lot of time being trained about how to treat termites, right? That's the problem from their industry's perspective. It's like, why are we learning about how to apply termiticides, right? How to store termiticides, and on and on. I've been sitting for hours,
Yeah. And if they have to go through training anyway, then why not have them go through, I'm just throwing numbers out here. I know these aren't the right numbers, but why not have them go through 20 hours of WDI training instead of 10 hours of WDI training and 10 hours of treatment training that they'll never use?
Right.
And that was the
Yeah.
sort of the genesis of Dr. Rinchi's,
Right.
idea about trying to pull something together where they go through a centralized training. Those folks that want to do that work.
I mean, you figure if all they're doing is WDIs, they're going to be better if their training is solely focused on that. So,
Right.
So, Robert, this is Randy. So, are you suggesting that there should be another category, like a termite A and a termite B, and the B would be like for WDIs? Or I'm just curious, because you're right, it is two different things. They're not going to need to know the treatment side of it. I understand that.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess, Randy, this is what I would say. I think so, because I'm kind of, I'm sympathetic to their side. I mean, I've heard both arguments. I think so, but at the same time, I don't think of this as termite A and termite B. I think of you and your work as termite A, right? And their work is looking for wood destroying insects, right? And I know you do both, but what I'm saying is I just sort of see these things as there's a way to disentangle these. And I think these are complementary industries, right? So if you got a big group of people out there that are really good at finding termites but don't have the certification to treat them, then you're going to get that work, right? Or the pest management industry is going to get the work on the backside once they find these insects, But maybe I'm naive and maybe I don't know it from the industry, from the pest management industry side as well as you would. But it seems to me there's a way to make this all work.
I don't think you're naive at all. I mean, in all actuality, if you think about it, it's not just termites, man. It's wood destroying insects. Right?
That's what I'm saying, Mike. That's why I don't think
beetles. It's death watch borer, old house borers. I mean, it's all those wood destroying insects that need to be looked for. Too often we have people just looking for termites, and they need to be looking for everything. And sometimes that comes back to bite them in the end. You got people just looking down for termites when you've got kick holes from drywood termites above you. There's a lot of training that could be done on identification of all types of wood destroying insects.
And Mike, what I see, I think you're exactly right. What I see is there's this bifurcation, right? There's so Randy and Brian and Warren and all the folks in the industry that do pest management, they are looking for that wide variety of wood destroying insect pests and fungi, for instance. But the folks that are doing home inspections that want to get into WDI reporting, I think it's just my opinion, but I think their mindset is very focused on this is a termite report, right? Whereas
I would agree with that.
The management industry understand that this is not just a termite report,
Yeah.
Do we take any leads from, and did I hear this correctly when we were talking on the insurance side, that if the insurance companies look at a company, if they have 25% or more of their business is just inspections, that they may not want to insure them? Was that what I heard?
That's what I heard.
Some carriers, yes,
Yeah.
some carriers.
Yeah, from the carriers.
Right. It depends on the carrier. They look at, because you have to tell them what kind of work you do. Is it general pest? Is it termite treatments? Is it pre-treats? Is it WDIRs? Is it general pest? Lawn and ornamental? They want all that broken down. And if your total sales, let's say 100,000 in sales, if 25,000 or more is just WDIRs, they may not write your insurance. They may not want you.
Okay.
Not all of them, but the gentleman that was at the meeting here a few months back, he indicated that, and I have run into that too. Other carriers will do that.
Yeah, well, I just didn't know if it was worth considering in this conversation here that, carriers do a lot, have actuaries and so forth, and they're taking into account the risk, right? And so,
exactly.
From the public's perspective here, I'm thinking about this and creating categories and bringing others in that are just going to be trained to just do inspections. Might be interesting to, consider that, hey,
your insurance policy is going to go up.
Well, I was just saying, yeah, and carriers are saying that, hey, listen, if a majority, if a large percentage of your business is just inspections because you're not also, treating and maybe having eyes on more on a daily basis for treatment and so forth, I don't know.
there's something to be said there that I was just kind of reading the tea leaves there a little bit. Thought I'd mention.
Question back to Dr. Puckett and it was really with Dr. Renchie. Within the training that goes on at A&M, how much on the wood destroying insect, how much content is there or could there be in that? Because I'm trying to think back of what we heard. And is there a way to split some of that? But I mean, this is kind of intellectually an interesting thing to decide it out, because then it really is, you're talking about people's being able to make a living and add some money and value, but you've got insurance claims and stuff that beg to differ, so that it's intermingled. Anyway, how much wood destroying insect inspection, if you will, is in that training that you've got now?
Yeah. So that's a 16-hour training.
Total.
Total. One full 8-hour day, 2 4-hour days. And we work through the wood destroying insect report. That's about a 45-minute presentation. Rebecca Hammond will often come from TDA and give that talk.
Yeah.
We do about an hour and a half presentation on the identification, biology, and management of the wood destroying insects as a group, as well as wood rot and fungi. We do about an hour and a half hands-on demonstration where they actually inspect a structure that we know to be infested with subterranean termites, and we train them. So there's a lot of tools that we use that are sort of industry standards, and sometimes some new things like the Termatrack device and boroscopes, some things that they may not have put their hands on before. But so we got about an hour and a half. What did we say? An hour and a half, about 4 hours.
Yeah, 4 to 5 hours is what I hear.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So actually, it's probably on the lower end of that. Maybe.
Yeah, 3 to 4. Okay.
And it depends every year. Sometimes portions of that course get squeezed a little bit because we're outdoors and we got weather issues and we're moving folks around from our main campus to the Rellis campus, and so unfortunately, I would say that only a small portion of that time is spent on thinking about how we look for and find wood destroying insects in a structure.
Well, if it helps, guys, when you look at the manual, right, the control of termites and other wood pests, which we use in the 8-hour course for the technician training.
Yeah.
About 1/3 of the 90 pages is either about termites, other wood destroying organisms, and/or inspections for those critters. So about 1/3 of that manual is dedicated to those topics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But so a person that comes out of a course like that and goes to work in termite management, presumably in most cases they're working as part of a team, a company that has established personnel who've been working with termites and other wood destroying insects, and so they've got a mentorship program. Sort of in place, and they learn the ropes sort of under live fire, which is the same as the people that are going out and doing home inspections and also doing the wood destroying insect report, but they're not getting the same, they don't get the same feedback, right? So if a pest control company finds out if they did a proper job or not, right, by their customer, that, they may get a call back on a job, but that's not usually the case with the home inspectors. So the framework of the work that they're doing is so totally separate, so it's totally different, So obviously, they need greater training in just the specific wood destroying insect identification.
So Nancy, here are the requirements for an apprentice, whether you're getting into any of the categories. You've got 20 hours of classroom training in 10 subject areas, and those have to do with safety and identification, and there's 10 subject areas, so 2 hours apiece in those. And you've got 8 hours of category specific training in the categories that you want to work in. So in this situation, it would be 8 hours in the termite control category, whether it be inspection, heavy, or on how to do treatments, and then you've got 40 hours of on-the-job training, which is what Robert was alluding to. where you go and you ride and or work with a licensed technician or certified applicator in that company with that category and do that training. So that's the current requirement.
Which is going to make it really difficult for those one-man operators out there that are home inspectors to gather the new category to be able to do a wood destroying insect inspection, because they don't have somebody that's a CA and working under a business license to do the training. Right. That'll be the next question that'll be asked from this group.
Right. Bob, Dr. Renchie is in some ways kind of out in front of that, because I know his idea for developing a training program would involve a number of different companies around the state, so that they would agree that they could have sort of a ride-along program where those folks were getting on-the-job training.
Yeah, I wonder how they do it now, because there's some home inspectors that are so low that have a termite category, how they ever got it in the first place.
It said they went. He said they went with a pest control company. It sounded like.
Okay. Well.
But you're saying that, so they have somewhat of this. These are my terms, not technical terms, I say, but a preceptive model, so that to get those 40 hours, that what Renchie was saying is we could identify some organizations who decide to have the training center part of it, or part of their business, to be able to supervise, and which implies they could probably charge for it too. If you're a big company that has a pest control thing, that you've got some training arms of it, as well as the state schools that have people like you. But again, then it's, if we're going back to Roger, what we're saying, and I'm hearing a third of the time spent in the termite is on, the wood destroying insects is about a third, then we might be saying that this is a category that has about 8 to 10 hours of it as a category if they want to add or do that. Is that what I'm hearing, or am I way out in left field?
I would want to bump it up to where they have to have the same number of hours as anything else, So I would say that
whatever that is, yeah.
Whatever that is, they got that many hours. If it's just that many hours in inspection, So anyway.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I know what Robert and Don were talking about is interesting, but if you're asking somebody to work under somebody else's license and insurance and the liability issues that come up with that, that can be a real concern. I mean, we may look at a way they can become licensed that's a little bit non-traditional. They still get the knowledge and they get the opportunity, but it isn't necessarily through the traditional route.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, you're right about the liability, because again, I do healthcare and I do people who, we have students who are not licensed, that if I have them with a preceptor, they expect the university to have liability insurance and all that kind of, and we have to send that over. I mean, I see Dr. Puckett looking at the same thing, that says that we've got coverage, and they can't just go out and say, I'm doing it now. I mean, it's within the confines of some kind of an organized class that they're taking that includes X number of field hours on the job training, if you will, that are part of a organization that does have insurance that covers you, because otherwise, why would you want to take them? I mean, you'd be open to all kinds of liability. The other Nancy knows that even better than me. Or she won't give them any insurance.
Well, and all the more reason to make them have more hours of training than they currently get in this particular I'll call it a sub-subject, but anyway, the inspection piece of the termite category seems to not be getting a lot of attention under our current system, regardless of what kind of licensees we're talking about. And so I think, the point I would make that I think I made earlier is let's figure out how to raise the floor a little bit for everybody on this subject. It seems like we should, Well, anybody have anything else they want to say about it? I would entertain a motion, but I'm not sure what it would be.
Hi, is it
Yeah.
okay if I add something? This is Aaron. Mike, I was typing to him and he said it'd be okay if I added my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Would that be all right?
Yeah. Sure,
Okay.
please.
I've been in the industry for a long time, like 27 years, but most of my experience is in California. And this conversation is really interesting. And I was just wondering, could it not be possible to, one, when I got here, I already have all these licenses in California and I obtained them here. And the first thing I noticed is that termite test is super easy.
Mhm.
Okay, it's 50 questions. It's ridiculous. I probably could have passed it with, going in blind, but I did read over some stuff just to make sure I was on the same page as Texas laws and rules and things of that nature. But it's a really simple test. Could not that test be changed to be more extensive? I took a test in California where it was 150 questions and not just covered identification and treatments of pests, but it required me to also know construction of a home, knowing about cement, how long it takes to dry and to cure, knowing about inspections, where to look. I mean, the test can be a lot better. And then what worked for our company is what we would do when a new inspector came on, once they got their license, they wouldn't be allowed to just go. There was a training period that they went through before getting their license. But after they obtained their license, they rode with an experienced inspector for about 3 months. So they could gain that knowledge, that field knowledge that isn't provided in a classroom setting. No matter how many classrooms you go to and no matter how many hours you spend in class learning about inspections, you don't gain the field knowledge unless you're out there doing it, and that takes time. It's not gained in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's an extended period of time. So could that type of requirement be added into this license if we're going to make it a separate license? You have to pass this test. That's more extensive. It's more difficult. Plus, you have to ride along with a licensed certified applicator who's been doing these inspections for at least 3 to 4 months to make sure you have the proper field experience to go out and do these on your own. And those are my 2 cents. More like 5 cents, but 2 cents. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Aaron, and I appreciate all 5 cents. I think those are excellent ideas, and Randy had kind of brought up the idea originally. He doesn't like the idea of these people, nor do I like the idea of anybody really that has not got much experience going out and doing WDIR, So I think, whatever the appropriate length of time is, I see no reason why we can't make the rule that you have to be a licensed technician for 3 months or however long that we think is appropriate before you can go out and do one on your own. That could apply universally and probably should. So.
Just so
Roger, may I speak as well?
Is that Deb? Who is it?
It is.
You're echoing. You might want to turn down the volume on one of your devices. Go ahead, Deb. We can't hear you at all now.
Let me figure out. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what's happening. Hold on.
Hang on just a second. So I just want everybody to know that the last person that spoke, Aaron, is Aaron Curiel. He is our IPM specialist. He is a TD employee, and that's why I encouraged him to chime in, as we often do when we're in the one room together. I am getting some question about public comment and folks that are commenting publicly throughout the meeting, and whether that's appropriate or should be done at the meeting.
It probably should be done at the end. You're right, and I didn't realize we were doing that. And you're right. So Deb, if you don't mind, let's put it off to the time on the agenda, and we can listen. Even if it's pertinent to this topic, we can still hear it then. So.
Okay, I don't have a problem waiting.
All right. So, any thoughts from anybody on how they would like to proceed, whether they want to put it in the form of a motion or not on this? It seems like there's still a little bit of investigation to do.
Could everybody please mute your line if you're not speaking? Go ahead, Roger.
Well, okay. I guess I would request that the staff bring us a proposal on what a separate WDIR inspection category would look like, both in terms of the actual regulation requirements and the training, and kind of a proposed idea of how all of that would work in terms of the training requirement and the testing and the supervision and all of the things in the regulations that would need to be addressed. I'm not suggesting you necessarily need to bring us a draft regulation, but all of the things that would need to be addressed in the regulations to accomplish this. Does anybody have a problem with that? Talking about that at the next meeting.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay. Then let's do that.
All right.
And I do think with that, it allows us to get, again, some benchmarks from other if they're doing it, or the extent of what's in content and testing of even within the existing categories.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea, and you probably don't either. You know, it's like, what have other states done with home inspectors? This is not unique to Texas. I can't imagine that we're the only place having it being asked.
Well, in fact, in some places, it's as it kind of is here. It's regulated by a completely different agency, the inspection piece. So anyway, I know that. So
yeah.
Anyway. So onward to electronic posting notification. Mike, you're on for this one.
Okay. Let's see. Hang on just 1 second. I'm making a couple of notes to make sure we get everything that this committee would like to have. Okay. We're approached by the industry in regards to posting notification, and there's a few things that they wanted to maybe take a look at in that regard. One of the main things was currently the way that the law is written and the way that our rules are written for certain types of entities, particularly like apartment complexes with 5 or more units or something of that nature. You're supposed to post a sign, and it even and a rule gives dimensions of that sign in an area of common access. So a lot of times that's going to either be in the, say, an apartment complex office or a laundry room or something of that nature, which can be considered an area of common access, but people may or may not go and see that and see when there may be an application that's coming up. And the requirement is to post this 48 hours prior to an indoor treatment of these dwellings. And if it, like, say it's only one dwelling in a structure, all the adjacent units, that dwelling has to be notified, and all adjacent units, top, floor, bottom, and sides. And that's 48 hours prior. So the question came up is, can we do this? Can the industry do this electronically? In this day and age, with chat rooms and posting areas, neighborhood chats or whatever they're called, where people post things, would it be possible for the posting notification requirement to be done electronically? Was one of the main things that was brought up by the industry. The law says that you will post, but it alludes to posting something physically, but it seems like there may be wiggle room for posting in another manner, like electronically. And in this day and age, you probably get to more people, and more people are going to actually see that posting if there's an email list or place where they go and look at electronic postings and things of that nature. So that is what was brought to us by the industry. along with some other things, but that could kind of start the conversation.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Warren.
I'll give you a great example. Medical industry with 6 different buildings, and we gain access with the head lady buzzed into the offices, and we're going to do the even numbered buildings on this day through 2, 4, and 6, and then the next visit is going to be 3, 5, so forth, 1, 3, and 5. And so I go through, and they have a posting notice in the break room of the main building, and she carries me over to the next building. There's no notification. We go to the next building, no notification. And in the old days, we would make sure that the administrator had the paper and posted it in the break room, main access, whatever. And so the other buildings didn't know. They thought they knew the pest control guy was going to come on Wednesday, but they weren't sure which Wednesday because they didn't see the paper. So having the email ability, that administrator could send it to the manager of building number 2 and building number 4 and building number 6, whatever, and they could directly communicate, this is your notice, your pest control, your building is being done on this day, your regular service, boom, and receipt requested. So I think this could be a really good thing.
Now, and I comment to that, Warren. That's great, and I appreciate your comment. And in that regard, one of the rules that I get put in y'all's package, there's a lot of the documents that are in y'all's packet or you have access to have to do with the posting requirements, and there's quite a bit. There's quite a bit of stuff there. But one of the things is the responsibilities of unlicensed persons to post and give posting notifications. And I think in Warren's example, that's what you have there. Is you've got a building manager that has that requirement to post. They're the ones that must make sure that posting gets done. That being said, the pest control company has to give that posting to that building manager, of course, for them to post, so that they have it available. And in all actuality, currently, a pest control company can send electronically that posting notice to the building manager, and then that building manager has to post. So that is available to be done currently, that particular aspect of it.
Question about the areas that Warren's talking about seem almost intuitive. You know, you've got an organized building, a large agency, you've got people computer savvy. What about the smaller ones where that may not be the case? I mean, and these are, because it says 5, occupancy of 5. So like maybe I own a building and it has 6 rental units in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, the rules address smaller. I mean, there's fourplexes and things like that don't meet that apartment complex definition of 5 or more dwellings, and the rules do address how you would notify those folks, and that would be a good, that I can see definitely being a benefit to the industry, being able to send those individuals an email with an electronic posting notice in it, instead of having to go and physically give them a posting notification and or a consumer information sheet if they ask for it. So the 4 units or less type situation, that would certainly be, I can see wanting to be able to post electronically or send those people an electronic posting instead of physically having to go give that to them.
Well, in the days of disparities in housing right now, there are people who do not have computer or internet access in those facilities.
Now, that is a good point. I mean, that's a really good point. So then you would have to ensure that if you've got folks that aren't able to receive an electronic notification, that they get that notification in a more traditional way.
Mike, are you talking about on the ones that are smarter units, the unlicensed person sending out the notice to everybody, or the pest control company? I'm not sure that people are going to give us their emails, to be honest. To be able to do that.
I get it. No, it's the pest control company in 4 units or less. It's the pest control company's responsibility. So let's take a look at these rules here.
I actually tried to read all of those last night, guys, and and it was like then the size and the font size. Some of them are a little more specific than others, and there were rules about posting and getting it on when they come into like for schools at the beginning of the year, that they give them in their packet that there's information about this. There are some people don't have, I was going to say, when you have rental agreements, usually within the agreements, there's some mention of, at least in public housing and others, about pest control application and notification. Smaller landlords, I'm not as sure if that's in all of them or not.
Yeah, and that comes down to responsibility. And that throws me back into the old days before people really had a lot of computers. A great example of San Antonio Credit Union, downtown San Antonio, years ago, when we got involved with the building, we found out that the vice president was allergic to all kinds of chemicals. So they had to know definitively that Spider-Man was coming on this Wednesday at this time.
So he wasn't there. Yeah, got it.
And so we posted with the head of maintenance on the doors ourselves that notice of pest control treatment on this day and time. And so we physically, and that's the way it originally was written in, was that the pest control person will ensure that notice of pest control treatment is going to be done. And so it's on the entry door, it's on the all the bathroom doors, first level, second level, and all of the strategic places that people are going to see it. So that's the concept of the notice. Yeah. And so now we're doing electronically, or we're looking to do it electronically, which is a good thing. But like Nancy says, not everybody's going to have access to the computer. So it's that double-edged sword that I'm looking at. And like I said, I'm old school. With our company, we physically would do it. When we set the service up, we gave the notice of pest control treatment, handed it to the person, the administrator, and made sure when my technician hits the door, he makes sure that he sees that notice of treatment. And he knows to go, hey, where's the notice of treatment? It's not posted. What happened? Mm-hmm. It's our responsibility to make sure it's posted.
And Warren, this is Brian. Another thing is, and we're reposting most of our stuff. I try to do it every few years, and I talked to Mike about it. But you get that, receipt, posting, and the consumer sheet that they received it. So, because you do get into situations like we all know they do like, yeah, your guy goes out there, there's nothing hung, or they ripped it down.
Yeah.
And, but that, you know, that's what I'm trying to make sure of too, because we can't always police it. But as long as we got that receipt and got it in our file, which we're doing anyway, just for CYA, you know,
right.
You know, that's the most important thing to kind of, that's what I'm looking at. I'm just trying to follow those because I know these things are not always going to be left up.
Yeah, because that seems,
so
Brian, that
trying to
seems
protect
reasonable because you're providing the information. Whoever the IPM coordinator, the property manager, you know, has a read and refer. You know, it's like delivered and read type thing. Yeah, that's
right. Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, because you're right. I've done work in studies even, and it's like the next day the tenant themselves, it's like it's gone. Yeah, and I knew it was there because you put it on the door and in yourself. So,
yeah.
And one of the documents that you guys have is the receipt that was, this was actually created back at the board, but there's a receipt for consumer information sheet and pest control treatment notice sign that he's referring to. And it's not a requirement that you have that signed and kept on file, but it's probably a really good idea, you know, to have that signed and kept on file. One thing to think about too, in regards to,
it's a very well crafted and well written receipt, by the way. I really like it.
One thing too to consider is
in 1999,
if one were to notify electronically by email, then one could also keep those emails as proof of electronic notification. So that's something to consider as well.
So what are your thoughts? What does the committee think? Is this, I mean, how do we let people who are certainly who are able and have the ability to send a notice out, you know, that says notice and in time, because they do that for other, like, building, mechanical, public, plumbers, you know, construction overhead. It's going to be closed here, done there. How do we word this?
Well, I'm looking at the law, which is I have this habit of doing, and the actual statute that Mike sent out, the 1951 453 through looks like 456, and I don't. That's sort of our starting point in terms of how much leeway we have to do whatever it is we're thinking of doing, because we can change the regulations, but we can't change what this says. So it seems to me that there's really no issue with making whatever modification to the regulations we need to make to provide the consumer information sheet by email or provide the sign to the building manager by email. I think we would already be in good stead doing that. I don't see how we get around the requirement for the folks on site, the building manager or owner or whoever it is, to post the sign in an area of common access, because that is very specifically in the statute that it has to be posted, the sign, in an area of common access, unless we figure out how to redefine that to mean something different than what it says, you know. So I don't see how we get around that piece without a statutory change. That doesn't mean we couldn't ask for one, you know.
And I agree with that, Roger. Yeah. One thing I was wondering, and you would probably be able to speak to this better than I, posting the sign in an area of common access in this day and age, could that be posting it electronically to a site or a chat or whatever it may be that an apartment complex has? Is that
well? I that's a possibility. I would certainly want you to run that through your legal counsel, but I can certainly see that if we wanted to interpret it that way, we certainly want to put it in our rules that we were interpreting it that way. But I can certainly see that an area of common access could be considered an electronic bulletin board or an electronic, you know, website or something. Yeah, I could see that. Possibly, but that's it's very specific language. Yeah, and again, you know, to your point, not everybody has internet access. We think everybody does, but not everybody does. So,
That's a good point. Okay. So that's the electronic portion of this. Something else that was brought up is like the fact that what if a company posts and for some sort of an extenuating circumstance, like it says on the posting notification itself, an extenuating circumstance may require unplanned treatments. To confirm treatment dates, please call the contact listed below. And so it was brought up what would be considered an extenuating circumstance, especially when you look at the emergency waiver, because an emergency waiver talks about affirming that there's an emergency for pest control service due to imminent hazard to health or property or an imminent infestation. Now, one thing in my thinking about this is that if you're unable to do the treatment the day that you posted for because there's a weather event or the person's the applicator's vehicle broke down or whatever the case may be, it was one of the interpretations was then if you wanted to be able to go and help your customer or treat your customer that next day, then you would have to do some sort of an emergency waiver in order to do that. And then the emergency waiver referring to imminent hazard to health, property, or imminent infestation, as opposed to just extenuating circumstance in the notice of pest control treatment.
Well, and those examples are exactly what we had in mind that you just brought up.
Okay.
You know, truck breaking down or weather or something, because otherwise you get in this cycle of having to repost and wait 48 hours and, all of that. And it may not be an emergency. It may not really qualify as an emergency. You just need to get it done.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And that's good to know, Roger, and that's why it's great to have you as chairman and your historical knowledge.
The font of ancient knowledge.
No, it does, because I've always kind of looked at it as if I couldn't get out there today because my car broke down or something of that nature, or there was a weather event. The weather event, everybody would be able to understand. Okay. I own an apartment complex. I don't necessarily want you to come treat, in a weather event anyway, but then my recommendation would be as a regulator and in regulating these rules, post it for 48 hours and go back in 48 hours. Whereas the emergency waiver is sort of a situation where fire ants are getting into the room of where a baby is, or, bees or wasps, some sort of stinging insect or something is there. So therefore, I've got a situation where I'm waiving this 48 hours. I've got an emergency. I'm going to go treat. That's kind of the way I've always looked at using that form, not necessarily thinking that the notice of posting an extenuating circumstance related directly to the emergency waiver, because I would say
it doesn't.
You should.
It wasn't intended to. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then that's okay. So good. I was interpreting it correctly then, or at least the way it was intended to be interpreted, I should say.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at with that. I mean, that was what the industry wanted clarification on. Is if there is an extenuating circumstance, what can be considered that? And if you can't make it out there because of an extenuating circumstance like a weather event or broke down or I'm sick or whatever the case may be, then if you want to try to service your customer the next day, do you do an emergency waiver? And then then you're putting the company into a position where they've got to have some sort of imminent health threat or describe an imminent health threat or a threat to property or an imminent infestation, or should they just simply repost and go out when they can go back out in 48 hours?
They can bring a new posting with them when they go back out, and the whole reason for wording that notice sign the way it is and saying for more information call or contact is because, you know, somebody may be treating sooner than what this says, or it may be coming after. It actually is always going to be after, I guess, but that's the reason for listing the contact information, because, you know, people who want to know can call and find out what's going on, and if, you know, so that's the reason for having it.
Roger, who is considered the contact information? Is it the property manager who put it out, who just says it'll be tomorrow or something?
It can be the property manager, or it can be the pest control company, or it can be the IPM coordinator, whoever the people who are providing the service agree that it's going to be. You know, it can be, but it's got to be somebody who has knowledge about when the treatment's going to happen. So that's sort of the answer to that question. That's why it's kind of left blank as to who it is. The assumption was that in most cases it would be somebody at the pest control company or the non-commercial applicator if it's a non-commercial situation. But
so in my thinking on this, when the posting notification says that extenuating circumstance may require unplanned treatment, it's not necessarily referring to the car breakdown or the weather event or what have you. The extenuating circumstance that may cause unplanned treatment could be an emergency.
It could also be an emergency, yeah.
So, but are you saying though that they should repost if they can't get out there, or they can go ahead and go next day?
I'm suggesting they can go ahead and go the next day, and they need to bring a new posting with them if they go ahead and go the next day, is what I'm suggesting. Yeah.
But not wait 48 hours.
Right, correct. Yeah.
Well, you're interpreting that a lot different than what I thought. I'm glad to hear it out of your mouth.
Well, I'm not the guy that has to say these days.
Okay.
Anyway, I mean, Mike, y'all need to consult and figure out how you want to handle that. But the idea was, you know, sometimes it's just not possible to wait 48 hours, or it's not practical, you know. So.
Okay.
That's kind of what we were getting at.
So then the difficult thing for me, trying to, you know, as a regulator, trying to get things black and white as you can.
I know.
What's the list of extenuating circumstances? You know, where
it's not a list. It's case by case. It's not a list. I'm sorry. There's some gray area in the world. There just is.
So and what you're thinking or what you're saying, the emergency waiver is something totally different. Right. Emergency waiver is when you're not going to be posting 48 hours,
right?
Because of an imminent health threat or something like that. So you shouldn't have to. If you miss a treatment because of weather and you go to treat the next day, you shouldn't be trying to do an emergency waiver if there's no emergency.
Unless it is an emergency.
Okay, but your feeling is that it's possible that you could go the next day, bring a new posting notification, but the thing about that to me, in protecting the consumer and just trying to have this healthy conversation is. If I come the next day and I make a treatment and somebody comes home and their apartment's been treated, granted most of the pesticides these days are gel baits and things of that nature, and that's with a lot of responsible companies that do things like that. There are companies that do things the old-fashioned way and spray baseboards and things of that nature. Then they come home and their apartment's been treated, their baseboards are wet, whatever the case may be, and they didn't get notified 48 hours prior, like our rule says that you have to do. And it's the sign that says extenuating circumstances, you know, and not rule that says extenuating circumstances would waive the posting requirement.
It was never in the rule. No, we couldn't, you know, so I agree.
But Mike, if something happens and I called up and said, I can't come today, would not the person I'm calling just say they're going to be here tomorrow and go from the initial?
That's the point. Yeah.
The initial posting on there. I mean, they might have to run around and say it or put it on the elevator or the entrance that due to unforeseen circumstances, pest control has been rescheduled till tomorrow. It would still seem to fit under one. Like if you were coming the next week and say, I'm skipping the week, that would have to have a whole nother notice, like in my mind. But
well, I guess you would have to go back into the rule that talks about the responsibility of unlicensed persons and change that rule.
Yeah.
You're going to have to add language because you're waiving a 48-hour posting, and it says you'll do this 48 hours prior to.
And you just don't schedule it unless it is truly emergent. You give them 48 hours. Yes. What you're saying is if I come tomorrow and today, whatever today is, I forget today. I think it's Thursday. If I can't come today, then I can't come until Saturday, and you just.
That's the way I've always felt it should work within the existing rules and stuff that we have. Is that just that, and oftentimes too, pest control businesses are busy enough to where they've got work scheduled for tomorrow.
I was going to say Warren and Brian have been absent on this, but it's rarely. I would think that. It's like I might not come. I can't come tomorrow because I'm already busy. It doesn't seem unreasonable the way you're interpreting it. So I would recommend that unless there's some pressing need on that one, that we leave that one as it is. But what do you need from us then? Do you want anything more from us about the electronic posting? Because I don't know that we've.
I'd like to hear from the industry members on the committee. I want to hear some more conversation. I want everybody to get their say and their piece, so that we have a better, more well-informed decision, if you will, on how to go forward.
Agree.
Go ahead, Warren. I see you're ready to go.
I'm thinking about it.
Brian Benford.
Randy?
Yes.
Go ahead, Brian, you first.
I mean, everything we've discussed, like you say, the electronic posting, that's fine. Most people do have computers. A lot of people don't. So, we're still in that boat. I'm fine with it. Things are going to happen, weather, broken truck. You're going to have to, we're doing it the best way we can, and we're trying to keep up with it, And like I said, the receipt thing, I was talking to Mike a while back, and, how long do we just keep those like we would go 2-3 years, like record keeping and then redo them again? That's something you could do. Everybody's going to do it a little bit differently. That's just how I think it works good for us. That way I have it documented for us just to protect our business. So.
Yeah.
Randy?
Yeah, so I love the idea about the electronic notification. That's awesome. But I'm going to have to go back to the smack in the head that Roger gave me about this notice. So, Roger, I just got to make sure you're saying that on that notice that if, let's say, the truck breaks down, like the example you gave, and we're not able to get out there to that apartment complex specifically, so that would be the extenuating circumstances. Originally, this was written so that, okay, notify your contact person that you can't make it, and it's okay to go the next day.
Well, that's what was intended at the time, but I'm not the guy that's making the rules now. So you got to go by what Mike tells you.
I got you. Well, here in Austin, we got people in apartment complexes that if we go and they don't know we're coming, that's going to be a problem. And I'm not sure that is.
What do you do if you get
very good stewardship for the consumer if they're not notified that we're going to be coming by on a specific day and time?
Yeah.
I do have a little bit of an issue showing up like that.
So like, what do you do now, Randy? If it breaks down, what do you just schedule for next week? Put it out the 48 hours, as Mike says? Because I don't think that's bad. I mean, I think that's actually in today. I don't want people just popping up if they're not. I don't expect them. I mean, I don't think anyone does. What do you do?
Well, that's exactly what we would do, Nancy, is if we're not able to make it because of some sort of extenuating circumstances, then we're going to have to do another posted notice and then make it a 48-hour after that notice. I mean, that is a good stewardship for pesticide inside somebody's, home. So that's how we would do it.
Because on this one, I don't want to make it less. I guess I don't want to make it less restrictive in this regard, because the purpose here is that people know you're coming and when you're coming. So, if we.
And that's the bottom line, Nancy. You're exactly right. We just got to make sure they know when there's going to be something, when they're going to be inside their dwelling. That's exactly right.
And we do get a lot of, people that are sensitive to pesticides and such. We do get a lot of calls about, what requirements are to notify me before somebody comes into my dwelling or what have you. So it is a concern for some individuals, for sure.
Yeah, and to be very honest with you, it's not so much that we're going to be applying some sort of a pesticide. It's the fact that we're going inside somebody's home. That's the main issue.
That's a good point.
We want to make sure that we've been announced.
Well, as long as we're talking about the sign and the electronic provision, I would say, from my perspective, bring back some amendments to those regs that allow it, and to the extent that we can under what 1953 says, But I would say bring that back to us and let us look it over as far as allowing electronic provision of things. You're going to figure out some way to deal with the situation of notice to people who don't have, computers or iPhones or whatever. But, to the extent we can, I think we ought to try to be able to do it. So
we'll get with our general counsel and see how they interpret that law in regards to posting and see what we can do.
But yeah, if it's not already allowed, I think we ought to fix the regs to the extent we have the flexibility under the law. Fix the regs to allow it, I guess, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think that then we're kind of down to, as far as this topic goes.
I think we're finished with this, unless somebody has something else they want to say. All right, let's do the enforcement update, Mike.
Oh, okay. Next. Okay, so we started actually with the inspection numbers. I gave you the inspection numbers in a few different ways for you to look at. The very first document is the document that's really most telling as to where we are for performance measure purposes at the end of the third quarter. That's this document here. I don't know if you can see it. It's got it on the left-hand side. So our commercial business inspections, our goal is 980, and we had done 668 by the end of the third quarter. So that's 68.1% of our goal. Our non-commercial inspections, which of course is our hotels, motels, apartment complexes, nursing homes, and things of that nature, which a lot of those you can't go to right now. Hospitals, nursing homes, difficult to do. But we're actually doing a pretty good job with that. 460 is our goal. We did 302 by the end of the third quarter, so we're at 65.6%. Schools, we're in good shape because we try to jump out on schools early because we do have difficult time during the summer. And when we're getting back to school starting up again. And the COVID-19 has played a significant role in all of our inspection numbers and everything. Our goal for schools is to do 250 school district inspections. We had done 203 by the end of the third quarter, So we're at 81.2%. So we're really hoping that we can maybe meet that goal, even with the situation that we're all in. Our use observations, our goal is 190 use observations, and we had done 115 by the end of the third quarter. So that's that from that. The next document shows you what we did just in the third quarter. And it breaks it down, like for commercial inspections, we did 200 in the third quarter. And it breaks it down what type of inspection that was: complaint inspection, a for cause inspection, a reinspection, or a routine inspection. So that's how that's broken down. So that gives you a little bit more detail as to the type of inspection that we went and performed. Predominantly we're going to be doing routine inspections, but we do have complaints that we investigate. We do have situations where we feel there may be something that we need to go and look at for cause, which means that we may feel like there could be an issue or non-compliant issue. And then the reinspection is when, there was a minor non-compliance issue, but we need to go back and make sure that was addressed. And then, of course, our routines. So that's that document. The next document is broken down by region. Same numbers, but it's broken down by how the regions did the number that each region did. So that gives you that information. And I won't go through all that because, like I said, the numbers are the same as far as totals. But you, at your own perusal, you can look at our different regions. Region 1 is our Lubbock region out in Panhandle. Region 2 is our Dallas region office and surrounding area. Region 3 is our Houston region, and Region 4 is our San Antonio, and then 5 is out of San Juan down in the valley. So that's how we're broke up into regions. So that gives you those numbers. The next thing we have is our enforcement report. You can see in our enforcement report that we issued 51 notices of violation in the third quarter. We did 11 warnings. Going through the notice of violations, you can see we had failure to comply with training or supervision requirements at 13. That was the highest amount of violations. We had failure to maintain required insurance at 8. Going down to operating without a business license, we had 9 of those. So we continue to investigate and take action on folks that are operating without a business license. Then you can see the warnings there and how they're broke down. The total number, total violations and warning were 61 in the third quarter. The amount of penalties assessed, 12,450, and the amount collected, 11,250. There was some concern by the committee the last meeting in April in the number of notice of violations and warnings that had been given at the end of the second quarter. And as we had explained at the time, it was staffing issues, things of that nature. And I didn't give you the last meeting's document, but last meeting we had done a total of 26 notice of violations and warnings. And this quarter that we just reviewed, we did 61. So you can see we're back on the rise with our enforcement. We are getting our staff, that we need. We're fully staffed in the Structural Pest Control Service program at this point. And enforcement has hired some case preparation officers. So we're getting back on the horse in our enforcement. Does anybody have any questions about that?
I'm curious on the working out of category in the NOVs. It's not a huge number, but I'm curious if there's a pattern to it as far as what category it is they're working in without a license.
So the 4 working out of category?
Yeah.
That's a good question, Roger, and I would probably have to do some research on that. I mean, I can give a common example somebody doing termite work that only has the pest control category, or you know the deal with the category.
Well, I wondered if that was it. I just wondered if there was kind of a common, if it was like people doing lawn and ornamentals, say, with a pest license or something like that.
Yeah, and that could be the case too. That could be the case
Yeah.
too. I'd have to go back and look at those 4 incidents and see just what categories they were working in.
Okay.
Does anybody else?
Well, I understand that things are, picking back up again. It's good to see the enforcement numbers. And I know COVID's affecting everything because it's affecting my life too and everybody else's. So, you've got to make do with what you can. And it looks like y'all may have trouble meeting the numbers this summer on the inspections. I'm just guessing
It's possible.
with things shut down, so that's just how it is.
And I'm sure the LBB will be somewhat understanding of that given the COVID-19 situation. I do want to give kudos to the Structural Pest Control Service Program now that we're fully staffed, particularly to Aaron too. They've done a great job, Aaron in particular, of getting the incidents that we received from the field that come to the Austin office to get reviewed so that they can go up to enforcement for enforcement stuff. We're completely caught up with the stuff that's come to the office, and we had a backlog during the times when we were short-staffed. But kudos to Aaron and the Structural Pest Control Service staff.
I just have a comment for Mike. Can you hear me, Mike?
I can. Go ahead, Warren.
About 30 days ago or so, I had my inspection, my routine inspection, and I just have to tell you that your inspector is grade A. I'm telling you, he's really good, very thorough, gave us some little tips, and I hope you hang on to this inspector. He's really good.
Warren, I want to thank you for taking the time to write me an email about that. I forwarded that email to his supervisors and our management. And not a lot of times do people take the time to say the good things about our folks. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And hopefully we can keep everybody we've got right now.
Good deal. Any other comments or questions on the numbers? All right. For topics to be placed on the agenda for upcoming meeting, and I'll just say at the outset, it appears to me that all 3 we discussed this time are coming back. So I'm not sure we have, or at least it seems to me they are. So I'm not sure if anybody has any ideas for other things, but speak now.
So what I've got, I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
So we've got the insurance at the next meeting. We're going to be doing a little bit of research in regards to insurance amount, and possibly what other states are doing with insurance and such. Getting with Nancy to kind of get some commonalities or what those amounts should be. The second thing that we said to bring back is going to be the other category for inspection only on wood destroying insects, and that's for the staff to kind of bring a proposal as to what that might look like in rule, if you will, and or training requirements and such. Then the last is going to be the electronic notification and seeing what we can do with the law that we have and whether we can address electronic notification by rule with the existing law we have, or if we'll need statute change.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I thought we had.
And then also, Roger, you wanted the overlap with the lawn and ornamental and the weed control categories.
Yeah, I would like to. I did want to address that because I had heard there were some issues with that. There may or may not be. I just kind of like to know what y'all are doing with that in terms of enforcing the licensing one way or the other.
I think
that's been a long-term issue.
Yeah, it's actually pretty timely to do that in October because of the legislative session coming up next time around, and what the industries may want to get together and do with regard to legislation. So to kind of give the rest of the committee a little background on that, just a mile high view. In structural pest control, we have the lawn and ornamental and the weed categories. Lawn and ornamental allows you to treat pests and diseases of the lawn and ornamentals in landscape. And then the weed allows you to apply herbicides, whether it be pre and post emergence or something like a Roundup or something like that. We have a law that says that if you get a similar type of license under the ag code, that the occupations code does not apply. So basically, it's allowing you another avenue to license to do those types of work. So under our ag code, we have what's called the landscape maintenance category, and we have the vegetation management category, which used to be called right-of-way, and those overlap. And there's a particular law in the occupations code that we can look at how it reads, how it's been interpreted, or what's been allowed as far as those licenses go, and we can take a look at that. And like I said, going forward, being around the legislative time, it's a good time to do it.
Yeah, it's been a long-standing issue as far as whether it's viewed as a licensing provision or a loophole, or people have had a lot of different attitudes about it. So anyway, yeah.
Very good.
Any other topics?
I know we I'm sorry, go ahead. I have no other topics. Anybody else?
Okay.
Sorry, Chairman.
Yeah, I was asking the board.
Got you.
The committee, I should say. Boy, I'm slipping way back there. But anyway.
Don't worry. People call it the board all the time, Roger.
Yeah. All right. So, all right. There being nothing else, then, and I think that's probably more than enough. Then let's move into public comment, and I will call you. And when I do, and this is just to take the place of the comment slips that we used to have, but we don't because you're not with us.
Can I say quick, Roger? I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. We had some people that joined after we initialized public comment.
Oh, okay.
That was on the phone. I think I've got most of them. Identified. Well, there's some others that are here that want to make public comment as well.
Oh, are there? Okay. Well, I guess I know I've got the two down, so
we can start with the
I'll call on them, and then we can say whoever else, and I'll just, for everybody who is making public comment, so that we have a record of who you are. If you could state when you begin your name, occupation, address, who you are representing, and the matter that you're speaking on, and those things. So let's go first with Debbie Aguirre. Debbie.
Good morning, Roger. Thank you. Am I being heard?
You are.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I had to make sure everything was turned off. I have a couple of things. I did want to bring to your attention that we do have an issue here in South Texas, and this is from our local chapter that I get a lot of calls about.
I'm sorry, Debbie. I'm going to have to interrupt you. I need you first to give us that stuff I just rattled off. Name, occupation, address, who you're representing, and the matter you're speaking on. It's just like you filled out the form, except you didn't.
I apologize. I'm thinking I'm sending you a message telepathically. Debbie Aguirre, and I'm representing the Coastal Bend Pest Control Association. And the topics that I want to discuss are the issue with that Dr. Patel had spoke about earlier with the disinfecting issue. I also want to discuss the issue, ongoing problem here with wood destroying insect reports and home inspectors, and the extension or addition of that category or possible issues that are ongoing there. What else? Was that it? My telephone number, TPCL number?
No, you're fine. Your address, but I'm not sure why we need your address. We know what your address is, so go ahead.
Okay, no worries. Okay, with regards to the disinfecting issue, I just want to say that we have companies that are popping up everywhere here that are advertising on TV, in the newspaper, and I contacted Janet Hurley and kind of said, who's regulating these people? I thought you required a sanitation license or some kind of disinfecting license. I double checked. I don't remember if I emailed Mike or I emailed Allison to inquire about the licensing provision. If we're the licensing agency, apparently we are not. So then I contacted the Texas Department of Licensing. They are not. And then I contacted the health department, and they do apparently issue some sort of disinfecting or sanitation license, but they don't really regulate it. So there's a lot of confusion out there. So these folks are applying products where I'm hoping they're at least reading the label, that are readily available. They don't have to have insurance. They're power spraying this stuff, inside schools, inside offices, restaurants where people eat, and it's very concerning. We do get a lot of calls for that. We do use DSV. We do it for restaurants, but we have very, very, very careful application processes, and we require the occupants to be gone. We do it at closing time. They can't come back in because that stuff that you spray is sometimes worse than the actual pesticide. And we have to have the correct PPE. These guys are out there. They don't even have the necessary knowledge. I'm just very curious as to how our state agencies are going to handle this, regulate it, and how we're going to recover from this. COVID's not going anywhere, folks. It's here to stay. I'm just saying, it's immune system or not, injections or not, I don't know when they're coming, but this particular issue is going to go on forever. If it's not this virus, there'll be something else. I'm just wondering if this state agency will be creating a category so that it can be regulated. Well, I don't know if we're...
Yeah, good question. I think, there's definitely a loophole in the law right now about it. I can tell you that. As far as I know, the only authority that TDA would have over this would be potentially investigating a misapplication of a pesticide, and that would be it. That would be all. So.
And enforcement of that, I guess, would just be under the federal aspect of it, based
correct.
on the misapplication of the Federal Product Label Act. So very scary, guys. I'm just telling you. I got that email. I know instances locally of poisoning of children. And it automatically goes back to the industry because it's considered a pesticide. It's a registered product, and it's a black eye to the industry because right away they're thinking it's a licensed individual doing it, and it's not. So just an FYI, I don't know if we can put it on the agenda for future consideration. I don't know where to go to this. Legislatively, I don't know if that's something we need to put on somebody's agenda legislatively, but it definitely needs to be handled by someone somewhere before somebody's seriously injured. Well, my next issue is on the wood destroying insect reports and these home inspectors. I don't know what's going on in the rest of Texas, but here there is a lot of fraud with these home inspectors, and I see it every day, and I get copies of inspection reports, copies of things, and I don't know how to handle it without figuring out how to report everything from the real estate agents that are compliant with, that are basically helping the issue. And what happens is this, is I know that there needs to be some cleanup with the verbiage of the regulatory requirements when it comes to wood destroying insect reports, and maybe that would help. But let me give you an example. So a realtor who doesn't want to do their job, too lazy, or I don't know, hires a home inspector. That home inspector then turns around and does that, and maybe he doesn't have a license to do inspections. So let's say he calls another company to do the home inspection. To do the wood destroy and insect report, but he's the purchaser of the inspection, okay? In the law, it says that the report only needs to be furnished to the person that ordered the inspection, not the home buyer, okay? So then it goes to the person that ordered the inspection, who is the home inspector, who then turns around and resells it to the buyer with the buyer's name never being put on there, and it can be changed at any time prior to that final report going to the home buyer, okay? My issue is this, is home inspectors with a termite license can do the treatments because they have a termite license. So if you have a home inspector with not very much knowledge going out, not recognizing the difference between drywood termite fecal matter and silverfish droppings, or finding 2 areas of infestation and they propose a $1,000 spot treatment, and then you have a Greg Aguirre with 50 years of experience going out there and he finds 20 areas of infestation and he's like, whoa, what's wrong with this? It becomes a big issue. All of a sudden they drop the wood report from the inspector with all the knowledge and keep the wood report from the inspector that only found 2 areas and gets away with a spot treatment. That's fraud. But again, the issue is somewhere in the middle of that repurchasing of a wood destroy and insect report, the final consumer never gets a copy and never is told what was really found on their property. There's so much bad stuff that is going on, and I don't know. Mike, I got tons of this stuff, constantly tons of this stuff, bad reporting, bad inspecting. They even made up their own disclosures. I don't know if you've gotten any of those yet. I tell folks, send them in. I don't know if they are, where the disclosure rule is not being followed. They literally make up their own disclosure documents so that they don't have to comply with the existing rules. But there's so much of this. The issue I have with the agencies, and I'm going to tell you that I'll give you an example here. About a year ago in May of 2019, we had a home inspector, chose not to crawl a house that was crawlable, missed subterranean termites on a garage, missed subs and drywood termites on the house, and basically cleared it. We go out after the home is purchased because the homeowner is seeing swarmers, and we find all of this evidence. He had just moved in, okay? Just moved in literally 2 weeks later, and we find all these problems, and he says, well, I just had it inspected by a home inspector, okay? So we give him a bid. He freaks out because, of course, it needs a full tent and needs a job and everything else. I give him the name to the state. I said, hey, you file a complaint. 1 year later, TDA finally sends him, and he keeps calling and checking and checking and checking. He sues the insurance company. Like Nancy says, they're the ones that end up paying the penalty, right? Sues the insurance company. They finally end up settling. But in the meantime, it takes a year for TDA to resolve and file the complaint. 2 really good inspectors. One that has been around for a long time, and one that is not as knowledgeable, but I like them both. I think they're both very thorough inspectors, okay? My issue is, so they send up their report, and that particular consumer sends me an email saying, wow, unbelievable. He didn't get a resolution. What he got was a letter from TDA saying that there was insufficient evidence to pursue the matter after 2 inspectors a year ago showed up. You couldn't have had more evidence, Roger. You couldn't have had more evidence than that stuff was obviously very badly inspected. My issue here is when there's a problem, there needs to be a penalty. When there is an issue, it needs to be resolved with the regulatory agency. There has to be mandates that come from above that flow down. If we don't, it's just going to continue. When it comes to wood destroy and insect reports, the insurance company got hurt, the final consumer got hurt, nothing happened to that bad inspector. And if you're going to penalize people with financially, you also have to require as part of the penalty more training. Mandate it as part of the penalty. You can't do any more wood reports for 6 months until you prove that you've gone through an additional, 40 hours of training, something to mandate it, because that consumer basically got robbed, okay? And the agency, where it faltered in the course of TDA, I don't know. I wish I did, but I don't know where it faltered. But waiting a year is waiting a year too long. I just don't understand what the problem there was, because it was pretty doggone clean cut. It's frustrating to me. And no, I haven't sent in, since we last spoke, any more complaints, because I'm a little bit afraid of the process, and it's frustrating to me, and I don't want to be frustrated anymore. I have issues with that particular case, because that particular consumer is one that I dealt with Mike on directly, and he was new to Texas and had nothing but bad things to say about TDA and their process. And I defended the agency, and I defended Texas, and I just took it really personally when everything was going on. But at the end, when he emailed me that letter, he kind of proved himself right, and I was really disappointed. But there has to be something done, because when the insurance company ends up having to pay for, I know was probably a $100,000 claim, because he ended up having to remove all the subflooring. I mean, it was a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pay for that, for the increased cost. The industry is going to pay for that. You've got this whole other type of industry, which are home inspectors coming into our industry, that are creating a little bit of a problem and creating insurance. You're discussing the cost of premiums going up, minimums going up, when you have that when you understand that most of the industry is comprised of small operators, 1 and 2 man operators, family operations, who mainly do pest control, general pest control. Very rarely have a complaint, very rarely file for insurance, and you're going to hit them up for a problem that you know is based on this new type of industry coming in. And it's a little unfair to the traditional industry of folks that have been around for a long time. We really need to take that into consideration. A category just for wood destroying insect reports, maybe that's the outlet. Additional training, stronger training, higher insurance requirements for that specific category, and you can separate them, may be better. But to punish an entire industry for somebody that doesn't even do termite work and mandating higher cost I don't think is fair at all. Okay, and I'm speaking for these little guys that follow the rules and go to training, and like I said, carry very small routes that can't afford increased premiums, especially when they don't deserve it. But again, I have issues with these home inspectors that come in and don't have the knowledge, don't have the expertise, don't know what they're looking for. They don't even fill out these wood reports correctly. And it's a shame. I don't know how to fix it, but that's why we have a consumer protection agency like TDA. It needs to be fixed, and that's basically where I am on that subject. And that's it, Roger. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I think, in terms of this specific case and what did or didn't happen, I am sure without even asking that Mike will be happy to get with you and explain to you what happened on that case. I'm sure that he'll do that. So anyway.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So let's move on to Dr. Bob Davis.
Thank you, Roger. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, Dr. Bob Davis, BASF, Pflugerville. Not sure what else I'm supposed to say.
What's your speaking on?
Technical services rep also. And 2 items. First thing on virtual training, the CEU stuff, and then also a pre-treat training opportunity. First of all, on the virtual training, since we last spoke at the last meeting, I just want to commend TDA with working with us on allowing this to happen. And since that time, I've been involved with trainings that probably touched about 1,000. I was doing a little bit of math with just under 1,000 attendees. And as we spoke about last time, and the way we're offering them is pre-training notice, and then during the training, there's a keyword, there's a certificate, and then we verify attendance through those processes. We've been sending these back into TDA, and I think the process has worked pretty well. But I'm certainly open to hearing from Mike and then Aaron and the group if there's some holes there or some things we can do to help with the verification. But the actual quality of the trainings, I think when it comes to audio, video, and interaction has been pretty good. I think people are learning how to use the various platforms a lot better than they have in the past, and I think that's helping a lot. I've even had one of these trainings that we did in Oklahoma, but they had Texas licenses, so it was even done virtually out of state, but with the Texas licenses, so it's actually worked out very, very well. The second topic I'll just mention, I'm working with Randy at ABC, but within the next month or so, we're going to have an opportunity, we believe, to do a pre-construction treatment, and we're going to do it in such a way where it's soil treatment and possibly some Thermomesh and also some borate as we go forward. And then we're going to create a lot of training material, a lot of collateral, a lot of pictures, PPE, everything across the board. And Mike, I know especially Vic Alexander and the group in San Antonio, they had asked about, is there an opportunity to come to a pre-construction treatment where they could be part of it, ask questions, learn, give ideas. And this would be a prime time for that. So as we get that kind of nailed down on timing, we'll reach out and let the area inspectors know. And if they'd like to come, love to have them there. And just so you know, Mike, it's going to be my house. So there won't be other clientele involved. It'll be ABC and then myself. So
that's awesome.
That's what I got. Thank you.
I've been at Dr. Bob's house for training before with these. And as a matter of fact, Dr. Bob, I'd like to send a couple of our program staff as well.
Okay. That'd be great. And Mike, it's going to be my new house. It's the pre-treat.
All right. So thank you, Dr. Bob, for that. That's very helpful to know all of that, and appreciate the offers of training. Who else wanted to speak, Mike? Anybody?
I believe Dale Burnett wants to speak.
Okay. Dale, you're on. Dale Burnett.
1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Dale Burnett, representing two companies, one Burnett's Pest out of Creedmoor, Texas, and the other company, Burnett's Consulting, out of Driftwood, Texas. Thank you for letting me talk, and I thought it was a very robust meeting. I congratulate the committee on trying to dissect things really well, and Mike, as usual, did a good job of presenting and really getting into the nitty-gritty, so thanks. A couple of comments. On the WDIR, y'all's talk last meeting and this meeting has helped me in my thinking, and I've come around to not having quite as strong an opinion on whether it's a separate category or not, or a subcategory, but I would want to say amen to that the training has to be the same or more. It can't be less. And that's what my representative said at the January meeting, I believe, is that it can't be a shortcut method. And I think Nancy's numbers speak loudly to that. I actually have two home inspectors that I've trained, and they are still in constant, after 3 years, one is still in routine communication with my senior termite person, because in 40 hours, it's hard to see all examples. You're not going to, but yet that's the minimum standard we have, and we can debate whether it needs to be more, but it can't be less. Next thing with regard to posting, again, Mike did a great job of drilling down, and bottom line, reality is posting is accomplished by email these days and other social, other electronic media. That's how it's accomplished, with touching the most people. Posting is done with hard copy to comply with the regulations. It is not effective in many, many cases. Putting it in the laundry room, if we want to argue about who has, can we say not everybody has electronic access? I venture to say if a posting, a hard copy posting is put in a laundry room, effectively less than 10% of the people will see that in the next 48 hours. So we're still papering with our clients. I mean, sometimes we do the paper because we know it's not going to get done. We know the client well enough, we'll do the paper and we'll drive over there and we'll post it and pray it doesn't blow off in the wind or rain. But we're going to post and we're going to comply. But I hope as the general counsel of TDA looks at this, and we talk about that it says it must be posted in a common access. Common access these days is electronic. Is electronic. And I understand if the general counsel decides we don't have that, the TDA does not have that wiggle room to make a change now. I think it's a great opportunity under Sunset to get some of these things updated. That's what Sunset is for. So I really encourage that to be looked at from a realistic standpoint. My younger son just is about to graduate college, and I've seen the notices he gets. And believe me, the apartment complexes rely on electronic. If the painters are coming, it's electronic. And all manner of legislation is electronic. You know, the whole world's electronic. So anyway, thank you for listening, and thank you for dissecting all that. It was also interesting how Roger interpreted the 48-hour. It's good to have that history. I don't have quite the history of Roger, but I'm close to it. But it's interesting to hear. Anyway, on any of these matters, if you feel like the law is, a narrow reading of the law is kind of hamstringing us, it's a great time to seek change. Thank you for your time.
So this is Roger. Sorry, I got cut off my device. Anybody there?
Yeah, we got you, Roger. We got you.
Hear you. You're
All right.
fine.
You're good.
Do we have anyone else to speak, Mike?
Yeah.
I have not been notified by anyone else, so therefore I will ask if there's anybody else in public that would like to speak at this time. Public comment.
If you can hear me, I would.
You know, my iPad almost made it through a 3-hour meeting. It came very close.
Oh,
Anyway.
yeah, well, 3.5. You got to get a different battery.
Okay, I think we did have somebody that wants to speak. Who is that?
My name is Dr. Santos Portugal. I'm the technical director down at ABC in Austin. And I'm going to be very brief. I just wanted a little bit of clarification. First off, thank you very much. This is wonderful, very informative and educational. Thank you for your time and your commitment. So as y'all have, I've spent quite a bit of time in this Maroon Structural Pest Control Law and Regulation book. It's not my forte necessarily, but it's some healthy reading. I did want to point everybody out to Rule 7.148. That would be 748D. It's referring to the 48-hour. I'm sorry. This is regarding the 48-hour posted notification. I apologize. And as a protocol here, we followed this pretty close to the T in regard to 48-hour posted notification. If we cannot make that 48-hour notice, then we have to schedule 48 hours plus in advance and provide a new notice, with the exception being specifically an emergency situation as defined under under D as imminent health threat. So basically, if we have a guy going out or a girl going out and they're gonna do a treatment and truck, bus, or whatever, you know, based on situation, most likely they're going to have to extend that retreat to 48 hours in advance and provide that posted notice accordingly. That's kind of a literal but direct interpretation. I don't know if there's too much wiggle room the way it's actually written in the actual book itself. And I just wanted to make sure, I mean, again, we're trying to cover our bases and do things the right way. From what y'all have seen and from what you know of the laws and regs, the appropriate interpretation, I guess, verbatim of the verbiage itself? Thank you.
Dr. Portugal, that's the way I've interpreted it over time. I mean, that doesn't mean that it cannot be interpreted other ways, because interpretations are just that. But that's how I've interpreted it. I don't know if anybody else has any comment on that.
As I said before, I defer to Mike on the interpretation of that language.
Well, and ultimately, it's our general counsel as well. We don't do anything in a vacuum. I certainly don't interpret the law, or I do, but ultimately, when we're making decisions and we're looking at these things, we call in our general counsel, and we do this as a group. We certainly don't do anything individually. So.
No.
Thank you for
you're
your response.
hitting on, this is what the reasonable, prudent person or operator would do.
Yeah, right. I think that's right. Yeah. All right. There being no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. We'll see everybody. Next time. Next meeting date is proposed October 22nd. Does that cause anybody any consternation?
This is Nancy. I have a conflict with that, but if we've got quorum, that's okay. I can figure it out or try and break away. But it's my full teaching day, and we've gone all online, so I know I'll have to be a little more attentive, as in Mike, of doing all the technology.
Gotcha. Okay. I guess
Mike,
is
October the one where there's a big pest control meeting or something, if I vaguely remember, because we've had to change that one, not just for me, other times. That's probably not going to happen this year, but is there some big pest control meeting in October, or am I crazy?
The NPMA National is right around that time usually.
Yeah, it's around that
I'm
time.
assuming that we've already worked around it, assuming they're going to have it even.
Well,
They are. The
be
announcement came out yesterday. It's going to go 100% virtual, but the meetings will be on the same dates.
So those are the week before, right? They're not in conflict with our meeting, is what I'm asking.
No, it's not. It's okay.
It's the 13th through the 16th. So.
Yeah, that's the week before.
All right. Well,
thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Be safe. Everybody be safe.
Okay, goodbye.
Stay well, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Take care. Be safe.
Thank you. Stay safe.